Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I'm pretty sure this will be the last of my Valentine's cards for this year. And funny thing, this was actually one of the first cards I made well over a month ago when I started the series, and so many things kept getting in the way of editing this video and sharing it. I don't know, it was just a process. So finally, at the very last minute, I got this video edited and here it is to share with you guys. So I started this card by die cutting. This is the Lawn Fawn I Love You border die. And I die cut this multiple times. Yeah, I did this while I was doing a Periscope video. I remember doing this like 6 weeks ago, longer, possibly, I forget. But yeah, I had this whole idea in my head. And I used Ranger's multimedia matte adhesive to adhere all these pieces to this piece of white cardstock. Now, when I did this, I didn't have spray adhesive on hand at the time. If I was to redo this card, I would use spray adhesive because it would be so much faster. All you'd have to do is take all the die cuts, attach them all together with, like, say, a piece of painter's tape, flip them upside down, pop them in a box, spray them with spray adhesive, and then put them in place, and it'd be perfect, super fast, super easy. This method that I'm showing takes a little while. It didn't take super long, but it took a while. It was a little finicky. All I did was I squeezed the multimedia matte adhesive onto just my craft sheet. Any non-porous surface would work. And then I'm just using a little applicator, which I will have linked in the supplies. I've showed these before. I don't use them that often anymore now that I have the fine tip applicator. But for something like this, it makes it go a lot easier to just pick up the adhesive with the applicator and then apply it to the back of the die cut and then put them into place. And another thing I did with these, because they have such long tails and it would have looked funny on here, I wanted to be able to see more of the words themselves and not the tails, the way I'm adhering them all like this. So I just trimmed the tails on the certain ones so that, one, they still look continuous, but aren't as long as they normally would be, because otherwise you'd barely see some of the words. So I did that, and that way I was also able to reuse some of the areas I cut off and adhere them in the lower corners where there's only smaller areas, if that makes sense. So I didn't have to die cut quite as many, and it just worked. And then what I did when I was done is I am able to reuse these applicators before. I just don't let the adhesive dry on them. I just clean them with a baby wipe. I've been using the same one applicator for months now. Obviously I don't use them like a ton, but yeah, I reuse them because I think it's kind of wasteful to just use them for one project and throw them out. So yeah, I clean them with a baby wipe and then set it aside and use it next time. So once I was done adhering all these and the adhesive had dried, I ran this piece of cardstock through my die cut machine with the largest die from My Favorite Things Blueprints 2 Dynamics. And that helped to give it a cleaner edge. So it's all kind of smooth. It pressed it down, plus cut off all those edges. So I didn't have to flip it over and trim it all by hand. So it just created this kind of really cool embossed effect in a way. And then for the actual like main sentiment of the card, I have another Lawn Fawn die here, and it's the XOXO die, and a scrap of some Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock, and that same craft sheet, and I'm just mushing some of my little Distress ink minis onto the craft sheet. So I used Festive Berries, Spun Sugar, and Picked Raspberry, which is kind of my go-to reddish pink combo that I absolutely love. So I always start with the lightest. I squeezed the Spun Sugar ink and then a bit of the Picked Raspberry and then some of the Festive Berries, and then spray that with water. This is one of my favorite techniques, and actually I haven't done that since I made this card. Yeah, so it's been several weeks or a month or two or however long it's been. So yeah, I mush the watercolor paper, like, listen to me being all technical here. I just mush it onto the ink splatters basically, and then dry it quickly with my heat tool to speed along the process, and then press it back into the remaining color. And I do this as many times as I feel necessary. With coordinating colors like this, it's not a big deal. If you're using more contrasting colors, different things, you kind of have to be careful because you can end up creating like a muddy mess. Usually 3 times is the charm, it seems, to create like the fun, splattery, blended look. But there have been times I've done it as many as 5 or 6 times. It just it just depends. Kind of sometimes it's easy to go overboard with this, but other times it's kind of fun to create a really cool splattered look. And yeah, with this one I did it about 3 times, really just pressing the ink in to create a fun little mottled and splattered effect. And then once it was completely dry, I'm going to run this through my machine with that Lawn Fawn XOXO dye. After I took a sip of coffee there, you can see just the corner of it in the frame there. My big old mug of coffee, which I don't keep on my desk very often. In fact, same thing. I don't think I've done that since I made this card more often because there's a good chance I'll knock it over and ruin everything I'm working on and waste really good coffee. So, anywho, I die cut that fun little XOXO, and then I went on. Now, I was going to adhere it just directly to the card, but then I wanted to have it stand out just a little bit on this I love you background. So I die cut some vellum with one of my favorite things, stitched fishtail flags dies. And then I wrapped a couple pieces of beetle black doodlebug twine, so just baker's twine, on there as well, and just taped the ends on the back side of the panel. And then I flipped it back over and used the same twine and tied a nice little bow there on the bottom. And then to adhere the XOXO to the vellum, I used the same adhesive, my multi-medium matte, with the fine tip applicator. So this is like before I would have used that little blue adhesive applicator instead. But now that I have that fine detail tip on this on the bottle of adhesive, sorry, my words are just not coming out today. It makes it so much easier to just apply such a fine, tiny line of adhesive. And I mentioned that just in my last video. I just bought the bottle separate. I always link to the separate applicator bottle that has that fine tip. But all I did when I got it was I took the tip off the empty bottle and put it onto the multi-medium matte bottle. So no transfer adhesive or messiness or anything. Literally 2 seconds to pop the lid off, put it on the new one, and I'm good to go. So, once I had it adhered, I'd use that same adhesive behind the die cut on the vellum so that you can't see any of the adhesive on the vellum, and then wrapped it around and taped that down as well. And then of course I had to add a few little enameled dots just to kind of bring a little more color into the rest of the card, but I wanted to leave the rest of it as is, so that those I love you die cuts that I took so long to adhere would stand out. And then to finish the inside, I didn't really have a sentiment I wanted to use, so instead I grabbed, this is the Chit Chat stamp set from Lawn Fawn, and there's this little tiny birdie in the set, so I inked it up with Hero Arts black ink, and then there's a little speech bubble in the set as well, so I inked that up as well and stamped it. And then the little heart in the set, I just inked it up with the Festive Berries Distress ink since I already had it sitting out and I wanted the colors to match. So I just inked that up and stamped it. And then to color in the birdie, I went old school. It has been, I honestly cannot for the life remember the last time I did this, but I pulled out my Dove blender pen, which still has moisture in it, shockingly, because I honestly haven't used this thing in years. But I checked it to make sure it actually still had a little bit of moisture, and I just squished the ink pads onto an acrylic block, and I picked up the color that way and colored it in with my Dove blender pen, which, yeah, this used to be the way to go when I first started stamping, like, almost 12 years ago, was to, pick up color with the Dove blender pen from an ink pad and color that way, like before all the markers and the watercolors and just all the things we do now. This was it. This was the thing we did. So it was just funny doing it this time. So I colored it in very, very simply with those distress inks. And then the main panel I popped up with some foam tape, and that is all there was to it. So if you are interested in any of the supplies used, check out the description box below the video. I'll have links to all the supplies used. I will also have a link to my blog post. The blog post will also have links to all of the previous cards in the series because I did a lot this year. So yay me. I stuck with it and was able to get way more done than I thought. So if you missed any of them, check out the blog post because I'll have links to all the previous ones. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.